Let's get ready to rumble!
Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 188 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and MyMMANews.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
What up, though, as the kids say?
Are you over at this Donald Sterling news yet? It's been dominating every form of media. Your grandma's talking about it. Your barber's talking about it. Is it finally over? Can hopefully Mayweather, this fight this weekend, get some shine, or do you think we're going to be hearing about this whole debacle for the next couple of weeks here?
I think we're going to hear about it until the guy sells the team or until he takes until he sues the NBA. One of the two things is going to happen, and it'll be part of the barbershop talk, as they say.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of barbershop talk, not related to fighting, but Jimmy Kimmel had a funny thing on Donald Sterling in the barbershop. Go check that out. But on today's show, we're talking fighting. UFC 172 was this past weekend, and John Jones, I think, proved to everyone that he's the number one pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. Dominating Glover Teixeira, so we'll review that card. And also we'll preview Floyd Mayweather's return to the ring. I think before today, at least, I think everybody focused on this fight was looking forward to the actual competition in the ring, but there was some news that came out today that kind of stirred away attention from that, so we'll discuss that later. And of course, we have our standard segments with the standing 8 count, main event topics, and 2 rounds. But first, you can always get in touch with the show through lowblow505@gmail.com. Also through Twitter through @thelowblow. Also, we're available on Spreaker, iTunes, and on Stitcher. Don't forget to catch the Fight Fans Radio Network on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream along with Spreaker and Stitcher as well. So, man, let's not waste any time. Let's get into the standing 8 count, the top stories in mixed martial arts and boxing. And really, I want to ask you about this, Jorge, and I guess we could spend a little bit of time on this because I think this is fairly interesting. Can you kind of describe what's going on with Oscar De La Hoya and Richard Schaefer? Both these guys are kind of the generals, are kind of the leaders of Golden Boy Productions, but there seems to be a rift here that I've been hearing this entire week. What is the deal here? Is it just two guys kind of like not getting along, or is this really serious in which you could see, the boxing world right now is pretty much Top Rank on one side, Golden Boy on the other. Could we see it split now into 3 with, Golden Boy, Top Rank, and this unknown promotion, whoever's running it, whether it's Schaefer or Oscar De La Hoya?
No, there's a great possibility. For people who don't know, Oscar De La Hoya and Richard Schaefer are the 2 head honchos of what I feel is the biggest promotion in boxing in Golden Boy Promotion. So, apparently there's an internal rift going on between the 2 guys, and, there's a lot to do because of it, but it was clear that De La Hoya, obviously De La Hoya's days are behind him as one of the better fighters of all time, but what's happening right now between the 2 is that there's not necessarily a power struggle, but just a difference of opinions of how Golden Boy Promotions should be run. Again, Oscar De La Hoya, the main guy there, and Richard Schaefer, carries a lot of merit too, just because he is the one running the show when it comes to it. So Schaefer is pretty upset with Mayweather throughout the promotion for this fight. So what's happening between the 2 is that there was a power struggle, not the power struggle, but the difference of opinions within Golden Boy Promotions. Richard Schaefer wants to do certain things. De La Hoya wants to do things a different way. What happened recently also as well that might have caused the rift to happen or to crack a little bit more is De La Hoya has, of course, been talking of possible super fights between Golden Boy fighters against the opposing promotion known as Top Rank, led by Bob Arum, and Richard Schaefer, who of course is De La Hoya's right-hand man, is not having it. So if this were to happen, if a rift were to completely happen between Oscar De La Hoya and Richard Schaefer would be, if he decided to start his own promotion, would become one of the prominent promoters in the sport of boxing, just because one of the business background that Richard Schaefer has, many people don't know, but Richard Schaefer is originally from Switzerland and did begin his career with Credit Suisse, which is one of the largest, banking institutions in the entire world, and then, shocked his family and friends when he decided to make the move to promoting into boxing. So you're not dealing just with an average smuck in Richard Schaefer. You're dealing with one of the smartest businessmen in the world. So very interesting the way this will all play out. I think ultimately Oscar De La Hoya will come to his senses and say, hey, I need Richard Schaefer, not just because he's smart at what he's doing with boxing, but because he is a businessman and one of the more educated ones, in the world.
Okay, so I got two questions for you.
Yes,
One,
sir.
So when I gather, it's basically come down to De La Hoya wants to work with Top Rank and Schaefer doesn't?
That is part of the reason of what's going on.
Okay.
Richard also began to align himself a little bit more with Floyd Mayweather and Al Heyman, who's one of the top managers in the sport of boxing. The bulk of the Golden Boy fighters are also affiliating themselves with Al Heyman. So, in sense, there's a division and a power struggle within Golden Boy as well. So this is all what's going on. I mean, if you think about it, the other promotion, Top Rank, doesn't have internal managers or a division of power. If you will, I guess as a quick example, Bob Arum does not have a Richard Schaefer to compete with within his own company, and I mean competition of ideas.
Sure.
Or he doesn't have a strong manager like Al Heyman that is managing and advising these fighters. So when it comes to Top Rank, Bob Arum has a lot more control over that company. But when it comes to the other major company in Golden Boy, there's a lot of players in that game.
So that leads me to my next question. So if it seems like a lot of these fighters are aligning themselves with Al Heyman and Mayweather's it's always been kind of confusing with – he has his own promotional company, Mayweather Productions, but we haven't really seen this Mayweather Promotions really kind of take off in terms of it being a serious factor in boxing. If this split does happen, do you see kind of Schaefer aligning himself with Mayweather? So it could be, maybe Schaefer, helps solidify Mayweather Promotions. And then also, do you see other guys such as Bernard Hopkins, who's always, we'll see him this weekend in the background, I guess. I don't know what his official title is with Golden Boy. I think him and Shane Mosley they're part of Golden Boy right now, only as fighters, but also as kind of promotional leaders, I guess, as you say, for lack of a better term. Do you see them kind of going with Schaefer too, and De La Hoya being by himself if this rift does, if that happens?
So here's the thing with Golden Boy. The Shane Mosley is actually no longer a player within the organization.
Okay.
So with regards to that, he is completely gone. But, I guess Bernard Hopkins is more of a spokesperson, more of a PR guy, and I'm going to put myself out there for the organization. So he's more of the face of the actual company and doesn't have much decisions himself. But I think if it did come down to it, I think he would align himself with Richard Schaefer, to be honest. So this is, it's not something we see in any other sports. The division of Golden Boy against Top Rank, the two major competitors, to me, I think of it as an AFC versus NFC thing. Back in, the early 60s, it's just these two companies with the best players that happened. And now one of the conferences themselves is having divisions. So if that were to break, you think boxing is a mess right now, Jay? If there were three primary organizations, the best fighters in the world will never fight each other. And that is not what we want.
It would be a huge mess with television contracts.
It'll be a complete mess, man.
Yeah, big time. Let's move on and let's talk about some news that kind of confused about, to be honest with you. Last week, I said over and over again that Cain Velasquez's hand was injured and that he'd be out until 2015. I guess I was wrong because Dana White officially made Cain Velasquez versus Fabricio Verdum for November 15th. It would be a nice birthday present for me. My birthday's a couple of days later. But I looked at Bleacher Report, and I was not crazy. It reads here, UFC Tonight tweeted out, this is April 23rd. Cain Velasquez is still not cleared to punch with his left hand, and he refuses to rush back into the octagon. This is later with Ariel Helwani. Quote, I spoke to his wrestling coach. He told me that Cain's doctor cleared him to use his right hand in training 2 weeks ago, but he's not sure if Cain is ready to use his left hand yet. He's not sure he'll be ready by November. He said he's in no rush into that fight that's targeted in. He won't fight until he's 100%. There's talk of Kane coaching the Ultimate Fighter Latin America. The UFC approached him about it. They could film it in May in Vegas. That's a likely scenario that he coached against Verdum. So basically, there's problems with his hand last week. So I'm not delusional. I'm not crazy. That was in fact the case, but it looks like his hand will be fine in time for November. The Ultimate Fighter Latin America will be filmed right after the women's version of that show. Cain Velasquez for Fabricio Verdum. I know, Jorge, you saw part of the press conference. You seemed fairly excited about the press conference in terms of the media attention, in terms of them asking questions. What was the vibe of the media in Mexico? Because in Brazil, it was kind of like people kind of hype, the UFC coming to Brazil, like the UFC created this solid excitement for mixed martial arts in Brazil, but it was already there. I mean, some of the greatest fighters come out of Brazil. So the sport was already vibrant, at least in terms of participation in Brazil. It just needed to be promoted with actual fights in that country, in that continent, in all of South America. With Mexico, I mean, in terms of pure Mexican fighters, other than Eric Perez, I mean, Cain Velasquez was born here in America. I mean, in terms of a fighter born in Mexico, I don't think we've seen one that has been a significant champion yet. So the UFC going to Mexico, I think it's going to take a little bit more time for it to explode. Do you disagree with that, Jorge? What's the vibe of the media, fans, in terms of what you've heard, watching that press conference, in terms of what you've read online? Do you think this is the next kind of country to blow up in terms of it being a popular destination for the UFC, or do you think it has a little bit ways to go?
I think this is the next country, and this should have been one of the first countries, to be honest. But the problem is you don't have a native star, so you're trying to build off of the second-generation guys like, whether it be Kelvin Gastelum or, Cain Velasquez or Diego Sanchez or Gilbert Melendez, whoever it may be. You're trying to build off those guys, and it's just very difficult to do it in a country and break foot, because think about it. You have a lot of fighters from England who are very popular, a lot of guys from Ireland or maybe even Asia. Asia has been dominant in MMA for, how many years? 20 years or so. Yep. It's just very difficult to do it in Mexico, but the thing that Mexico has, the top two sports there are going to be one soccer and the other is boxing. So whenever you have a country of that population and fighting is one of the top two sports, it is rare anywhere in the world to find where fighting is still in the top three. I mean, there's only maybe, out of the, I guess, major countries, or, the more developed countries, or maybe even whatever it might be. It's very difficult to find where fighting is still that popular of the sport. That exists in Mexico, and for you to bring the sport and you bring these second-generation guys who at least speak the language, it's a great thing. Here's a good thing for the UFC, and I think it benefits them a lot. And this is going to sound weird, Jay, but they're lucky that Fabricio Verdum won his last fight. And I'll tell you a reason why. He speaks better Spanish as a Brazilian who speaks Portuguese as his first language. He speaks better Spanish than Cain Velasquez does as a second-generation Mexican, or Mexican-American, I should say. It's just unbelievable. It's just, and it's not Cain's fault, because, I am first generation here. It would have been easy for me to speak the language, but I continue to study it. There's a lot of cases where kids lose their language, especially when they're first generation, because they don't necessarily have to, or they're immersed in cultures where Spanish isn't that prominent. For Cain, he grew up in Northern California, where maybe if he grew up in Southern California, he might speak the language better. But the charisma that Fabricio Verdum carried himself in Spanish, in Mexico, I think did him a lot of favors, and I think he won a lot of fans, especially of the media there in Mexico, because you have a guy, a foreigner, that's speaking their language better than the guy that they're supposed to cheer for or cover. That was just unbelievable PR that the UFC could not have paid for. It sounds weird, but that's what I strongly feel about that. I think he made a lot of fans, one out of the media and one out of a lot of the new fans of the UFC because of the way he spoke so eloquently in Spanish. And he even, joked around and BS it in the colloquial Mexican style, which was something I noticed that I know a lot of other websites or bloggers didn't pick on. And it was a beautiful thing. So it's a great thing for the UFC to have two guys who speak Spanish to supposedly be headlining. I know I went off on kind of a tangent, but I wanted to bring that part up of how lucky the UFC was that Verdum actually won his last fight and that he's going to be headlining Mexico. Amazing PR for them, I think.
Sure. And to that point, so you talked about kind of the languages there. Does that affect Cain Velasquez's popularity in Mexico in terms of, okay, you have a lot of hardcore boxing fans who might want to check out the UFC for the first time watching this fight here. So if they see these two guys, let's say it's, October and they're back doing another press conference, do you think the fans would actually side with Fabricio Verdum? Or do you think ultimately it's going to come down to country versus country? Do you think that how far is that language, I guess, disparity between Verdum and Velasquez play into actual fans supporting one guy over the other?
That's a very good question. If I had to put it, I guess if I had to break it down in a pie, I'd say you maybe get 20% of the fans that are now maybe cheering for Verdum just because of how he did compose himself in that. And that's just an estimation of how I think. But they're going to go with the guy that has roots to that country, I think. But it helps out a lot the fact that now the Mexican fans and the media feel that they can kind of relate to Verdum, who is, of Latin American descent as well. Let's not get this twisted. It's not like he's a guy coming from another continent like Asia or Europe and coming to fight one of their own guys. It's the Mexican fans are going to have a right to choose who they cheer for. They don't necessarily have to have an alliance to Cain just because he has Mexican roots. He was not born in Mexico, and neither was Verdum. But I think the roots to Mexico for Cain and the fact that Verdum's native language is not Spanish, but he speaks it so eloquently, it can relate to even the type of, I mentioned the colloquial language and kind of just the mannerisms and the way he speaks, the jokes that he was dropping with the Mexican media was very Mexican. I mean, when you think about certain sayings that Americans and British, and the Brits have,
sure,
there are certain things we say and certain things that they say that might apply to them. I'm telling you, Verdum, it didn't come out in the way that the translator was interpreting what Verdum was saying, but it was very Mexican the way he spoke to that crowd. So I'm sure he swayed a lot of people and made a lot of fans that day.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see them going into this new market. I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Anderson Silva, Vitor Belfort, the first one. That was carried, I think, for free in Brazil, and that did really well. So we'll see here. I think there's a lot of potential in the market. I think there's a lot of potential in terms of crossover fans. So we'll kind of see what happens. But certainly it's kind of weird, Jorge. The sport, you talk about countries with fighting being the number one, in that top three of sports popularity. And it's too bad, really, Asia's not really part of that anymore,
Yeah, it's a shame.
With Japan, I think pro wrestling is kind of, minorly popular. But I think
baseball, obviously huge.
Baseball, yeah, but basically, it's kind of MMA's pretty much dead there. Honestly, ONE FC's pretty much, in South Korea and in parts of China and Singapore. Other than really UFC going there, I haven't really heard too much. There's no Dream. There's really, you don't hear, even with Pancrase or Shuto, I think, you used to hear plenty, from the guys fighting in Pancrase or Shuto, but now it just seems like the sport's going more in a Western direction. This is fairly interesting in terms of how you trace the sport back to 93 to now. I think it's cool in some ways, but it's kind of unfortunate. You would like to see more, I think, the planet be involved in MMA instead of just it being a Western sport. You got some news, man, about apparently this whole Donald Sterling controversy, Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather throwing their hat in the ring. Anything really serious to this, or are these guys just trying to get a little bit of publicity off the NBA?
So for people that don't know, and I thought it was quite comical the first time I heard it, but Oscar De La Hoya, former, of course, world champion, we just talked about him, is interested in buying a piece of the Los Angeles Clippers. And so is Floyd Mayweather. Yeah. And for De La Hoya, I think it makes more sense than Mayweather just because De La Hoya grew up in East LA. I mean, he's a native Angelino there, so for him to be interested in buying him, it makes sense. Mayweather, I guess, just because he has so much money, and maybe he can finally invest it into something smart other than strippers and whatever the hell else he's doing. But nonetheless, I mean, it's just, I mean, in the end, these guys run a separate company, a separate entity, and I mean, how much do they actually know about the NBA? It's just you know, they're kind of writing, I guess here in marketing and in PR, we kind of call it newsjacking. You're writing this wave of very popular news and you throw your name into hat or you put news out there that kind of relates to it just so you can get some attention as well. I think these guys might be trying to do this a little bit to bring attention to their fight also.
Yeah.
To the fight they're doing. Let's not get it twisted. De La Hoya is a promoter on a big fight that's happening this weekend, and Mayweather just turns out to be one of the participants in the event as well. I think 80% of it is that, and I think 20% they're actually serious about trying to want to do it. If it were up to me, I mean, other names that I've heard out in the, I guess, the blogosphere or whatever it might be, and Oprah Winfrey and Magic Johnson. If you ask me, who would you trust more, Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather, or Magic or Oprah? I'm going to go with Oprah before I go with two of these guys. Before I'd say, all right, this guy can run a team. It's just very interesting, but I think it is their way of kind of newsjacking the situation to bring attention to their event that just so happens to be the week of when this all went down.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you want to talk about rich people. There's, you know, people that hit the lottery, and then you got pro athletes, and then you got celebrities, and then when you're a billionaire, it's different. You're not just a rich guy. Like, you're in a higher field. And like, you take a look at Mayweather, yeah, he's rich, but Floyd Mayweather's not a billionaire. And neither is Oscar De La Hoya. Oprah is. And so I think Magic's pretty close to that, at least in terms of his business investments. Even though Oprah knows nothing about running a team, and I don't think she ultimately would do it, in terms of the actual how much she's worth, I think you got to take her more seriously. I pretty much agree with you. I think this is just more both these guys trying to capitalize off the news here. I think if anything, in terms of, you know, a kind of a partnership, in terms of, you know, a couple of guys teaming up to own a part of a team, I think that's possible. I mean, we see Shaq with the Sacramento Kings. He owns part of the Kings. He's not the primary owner. I think we might see that. Let's say Magic owns the majority of the team, and then De La Hoya, you know, owns part of it. I could see that happening. But in terms of this guy, of these two being like Jerry Jones running the team, I don't think so. Let me ask a quick question, just random out of nowhere. Sure. Yeah.
I'll give you three guys: Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather, Dana White. Which of the three would you trust most with an NBA franchise?
That's a good question. Dana?
Yeah.
Well, he's not really into team sports. Let's just say he is. Let's say, I don't know, you switch the background, and let's say he grew up a huge NBA fan instead of being in the sport of boxing. Dana White is a relentless competitor, and he would want to win. So I would trust Dana better, and Dana White would do it more in the confines of it being kind of like Mark Cuban. He'd be at all the games. He would argue with the rest. I think with the other two, they'd be more laid back. I could see Floyd being kind of distracted with other things. And he has, as we saw today with the whole drama with his, you know, I guess ex-lover, or I don't know if they're married, ex-wife. I think this guy has tons of baggage compared to Dana White, who has a history running organizations. So to me, I think definitely Dana White.
I completely agree, man.
Moving on, just real quickly, a couple of minor news items here. And it looks like the card is complete. Rafael Dos Anjos looks like he's going to be taking on, I believe, Jason Hyde at the UFC Fight Night Albuquerque. This card continues to get better and better. looks like we won't see Donald Cerrone in this card after all. But still, I think this is a fantastic card. Again, probably going to be better in a couple of pay-per-views coming up here. This card seems to be finalized. Certainly, if you're in New Mexico, not even in Albuquerque, this card I think is a must-go-to. In terms, I want to ask you, Jorge, just real quickly, in terms of buzz around town, I know it's kind of early. We're in May. I guess we're a little bit over a month away. What's the buzz here? Do you think there's a lot of excitement in terms of fans going to see this compared to, let's say, Bellator and even MMA Fight Pit? Or do you think we still got to wait, a couple of weeks out, maybe the NMA, until we get that hype train going on here in town?
I think it's going to be toward the end of May, and I reported these two last bouts when they were announced on swfight.com. But I'm not going to lie, Jay. I called Ticketmaster to see their thoughts on the event, how many seats were available, and they were concerned compared to other UFCs. They did mention that by this time, a little over a month out, this is one of the slower selling cards that they've seen in a while. So,
really?
And they didn't know if it was just because the locals didn't feel that this was a strong card, or because of the fact that MMA is just not as popular in these areas, or UFC is just not as popular in these areas where they had never been before, and that's why they stay away from those areas. So pretty interesting information that I received there. So I think, when it comes to, especially us New Mexicans, man, we do everything at the last moment. It's
true.
just, in Albuquerque, it takes 15, 20 minutes to get anywhere, but we don't leave until 5 minutes before we're supposed to be there. I mean, let's be real. I mean, that's
true.
what it is. I think a lot of people here are going to act within the last 3 weeks to 2 weeks. From what I've heard from a lot of people is that they feel that the tickets are expensive. And I'm going to write an article on this, Jay. It is not as expensive compared to other places. You want events to come here two, 3 times a year like this, you better be willing to pay the money.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the card, it's pretty deep. This is not an instance in where this is just a one-fight card. There's tons of New Mexican fighters. I think what's a negative is that, you have on one side Benson Henderson, who's not a star. He's a former champion, but he's not exactly a guy who's going to bring in casual fans. I think if he has a casual New Mexican here, like Benson Henderson, the black guy who, maybe was the champion, maybe. AC Ruslam, a guy that people still don't really know and probably don't even know he trains here. They probably just think he's just some Russian fighter. I think a lot of people just think, it's this, a main event in which Benson Henderson is probably going to destroy this guy, in which in actuality, this is a pretty even fight.
It is.
And to me, you see the commercials, Diego Sanchez, Ross Pearson is just promoted as Ruslam and Benson Henderson. So I think it's going to take some time. I think I am surprised by you saying that, Jorge, just because I see the commercials on here. I saw a lot of the news outlets stating that the UFC was coming here. So certainly the news was right on the money. I'm usually the first one to criticize them, but they're the ones actually with the report. I think you're right, Jorge. We'll have to see. This is a Saturday night. This is not a Bellator situation in which it's a Friday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's on the weekend. It's a Saturday night. So I don't know, man. Maybe as we get closer to fight week, but that is decently concerning. I would expect it to at least be in line with the other UFCs, especially in a first-time market, which so many fans have demanded this event come here to Albuquerque. It's unfortunate to hear you say that.
Yeah, so, just judging by the looks of it, people can go on Ticketmaster and see the seats that are available. Just by the naked eye, it looks like there's about 35% to 40% of the seats still available. So, at this point, it's kind of scary. I think there's an article up. I don't know if you saw it, Jay. We'll make sure to post it as a low blow. But I wrote a story where I mentioned that it's been almost 7 years since the last major combat sports card hit the Tingley Coliseum, and that was in 2007 when Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fought Albuquerque's Ray Sanchez. There was a little over 6,000 people there, and if the UFC here in Albuquerque doesn't do between 7,500 and 9,000, it will. To me, it'll be a failure.
Yeah, they probably won't come here again. And I think one of the reasons could be, Tingley. I've always said it. For people listening to this show that might not be familiar with our arenas, pretty much the Pitt University Arena, the arena in which the basketball team of the University of Mexico, they play there. That's the best arena we have probably in the state. And for some reason, we've had Tristan on here and other reporters state that the UFC cannot run that arena because of the configuration of, I guess, the seats there and just the roof and what's going on, which is still mind-boggling to me. But with Tingley Coliseum, it's probably ranking the arenas here. The Pitt's probably number one. Tingley's probably number two, and then we have the Santa Ana Star Center in Rio Rancho is probably number three. In terms of aesthetically pleasing, Santa Ana Star Center, even though it seats less people, I would have to say that it's a way nicer arena. And you have to wonder if this is indeed a failure. Why didn't the UFC consider running Santa Ana Star Center, even though it is further out? It is a nicer arena. There have been MMA fight cards there before, plenty of them. And I guess, as you mentioned, Jorge, the whole Jackson's connection there with the UFC. But it just seems with Tingley Coliseum, it's an eyesore going there. I just don't like going to that arena. And it's different with the Pit before it was renovated, where it had a kind of old school feel to it. It was a college atmosphere. It had the history behind it. And now Tingley does too. But Tingley, it doubles for rodeos. It's just really old looking. I don't know. It's not an arena that I enjoy going to see a sporting event at compared to the Pit or even the Santa Ana Star Center. Like I wouldn't enjoy going to see a concert there. It's just, I don't know. It's just something that it's a deterrent to me. Just that arena itself, the seats, is uncomfortable. I know when I saw my brother graduate high school, those seats were just super small. It's just the entire arena is just really old. The bathrooms are terrible. It's just, I don't know. It's just something that when you're seeing it on TV, presenting it to the world, especially when a lot of MMA fans think UFC and Albuquerque are kind of synonymous with each other, it's not the greatest first impression.
No, and I completely agree. It's just Tingley, if you think about it, it's, the third venue on the list that you want to have something on. One would be the Pit. The second, despite the fact that you got to drive 45 minutes out from the downtown Albuquerque, it would be it. And friends went off on one of the Facebook posts that I had in my article saying it's like they should have had it at the Pit, and it just can't happen. What Albuquerque needs is a state-of-the-art downtown venue, which we do not have, Jay, and I do not see that happening for another 15 to 20 years, man. Yeah,
we went down. The whole downtown arena in Albuquerque, that gives me a headache. I think the people have tried and it's failed, and it's just insanity. If you don't mind, let's move on to 2 rounds. I know you had something on your mind, Jorge, you want to talk about, I think, considering dealing with Floyd Mayweather, right?
Sure, I definitely do. And, earlier today, for people that did not see, I believe it was on Instagram where Floyd Mayweather tweeted a photo of, I'm not the most knowledgeable. I don't have kids. It looked like it was a sonogram.
That's what it looked like to me.
Where he stated, and I quote on his Instagram account, "The real reason me and Chantel Christine Jackson, a.k.a. Miss Jackson," and, to go away from the quote here, Miss Jackson is, the beautiful, black woman that he is always with. This girl is beautiful, like simple to say. So she was basically his girlfriend for a while, maybe the last couple of years. You saw her on the 24/7 shows. But the main reason, Floyd Mayweather continues to say, the main reason we broke up was because she got an abortion. It's an abortion, first off. and I'm totally against killing babies. She killed our twin babies. Hashtag Chantel Jackson. Hashtag Floyd Mayweather. Hashtag the money team. What the hell is wrong with you? If you ask me without putting the names of these people, to me, that's a 17, 18-year-old kid that tweeted that. It might not. Is that not what you would think, Jay?
Oh, exactly. And surprisingly, and I don't know. we have full-time jobs. We're gone. We don't watch the news. But to my sense, I don't think this has gotten any media attention outside of the boxing or combat sports circles. Is that right? It's not like any mainstream. This is a pretty mainstream story. This guy accusing this woman of having an abortion. Is that correct? We haven't heard anything major news about that, right?
We have not, but please believe that the World Stars and Deadspins and these websites, these prominent, I guess, let's put it simple, these urban websites are all over this, and eventually it's going to be caught on. It's just I don't understand, as a grown man with all this money and all these years behind your life, of why you would tweet or Instagram something like this. This is so personal. To me, this is one of the most personal things that you can actually put out in public. It's just unbelievable for Floyd Mayweather to do this to Chantel, I think. I don't know if he thinks it's a way to promote this fight, but what we spoke about off air are the way guys in, I guess, in non-team sports, boxing and MMA tend to act. I brought up the fact that a lot of these professional teams, whether it be NBA, NFL, NHL, they have classes for their guys to take on how to act in the media or how to act in the public. When it comes to single sports like boxing or mixed martial arts, you see a lot of these, of guys just losing their mind and just tweeting all these things. I mean, the DSs of the world, the Mayhem Millers of the world, they just go nuts when it comes to these things. So these guys don't seem to be as educated in PR as much as these team sports guys are. And I wish that the people that run these boxers and these MMA's careers to implement some sort of knowledge or just behavioral instruction of when it comes to social media. To me, this is unbelievable.
Well, I think the UFC's done that with the UFC Fighter Summit, and with fighters, you're under contract with the UFC, so that's pretty easy to do. And I think as fighters start to grow up with MMA and as they start younger, I think you do see that. And I think fringe sports, NASCAR, tennis, combat sports, you do see fighters, be more real and honest. And I think that's what makes them endearing, and that's what makes them more friendly compared to a LeBron or Kevin Durant or, even a Robert Griffin III. I think I saw RG3. He went to a NASCAR event because Dale Earnhardt Jr. is a huge fan. And RG3 was commenting on how, the drivers are so fan-friendly, how they'll walk around and talk to the fans before the race is going on. They're in their race suits, and they got a race to do. And it's different with team sports because they're so guarded, and the trust factor is limited. And with Floyd specifically, I think with any kind of training, I don't think anybody's going to tell Floyd Mayweather what he's going to do or not. I just think, how it goes. Same thing with Quentin Rampage Jackson. These guys are raised with their own rules, and they have their own egos. And it's different when you're in a team sport, when you're, in high school, when you're taught, especially if you play in a major market, California, Texas, on the East Coast, and you're already raised when you're 14 years old how to talk to the media. You're ingrained with that. So compared to fighting, I mean, honestly, there's no media attention in terms of the NCAA wrestling finals. I mean, there's no one tell you how to act there. And then it's kind of the same thing with when you go into the UFC, it kind of takes a while. I mean, you're on the undercard. Unless you're employed there for more than a year, I mean, you're not going to get that media training. So I think you're right, Jorge. I think in MMA specifically, because you're an organization, absolutely there should be a code of conduct, and I think the UFC is taking steps to do that. But in boxing, it's kind of a free-for-all. With Floyd specifically, as despicable as this is, there's really nothing you can do. I think Golden Boy's not going to tell Mayweather what to do, even if they wanted to. So I just think another despicable thing, and really uncharacteristic. And you have to wonder. We'll discuss the fight later, but this is something un-Floyd-like. I don't think he brings controversy to himself during fight week, and this is certainly something that he created himself. To my knowledge, this is not something that this other woman has brought up. This is of his doing. So I really don't understand why he decided to air his dirty laundry on Instagram.
Jay,
on Twitter.
is he distracted from
Could
Marcos
be.
Maidana? Is he distracted? I think he's underestimating Maidana. I mean,
He
people
wouldn't have
think,
done this if this is Canelo.
no, he would not have done this if there was Canelo. It's just unbelievable. So it just brings more intrigue. Like, is Floyd's mind completely in this fight? Let's not forget, Maidana was a pretty huge underdog against Adrian Broner in his last fight. And I'm not trying to say that Adrian Broner and Floyd Mayweather are the same fighter, but they have a similar style of fighting. I think Mayweather does it 3 times better than Broner, but nonetheless, I mean, do not underestimate Maidana. I think it just adds intrigue more to the fight. And I tweeted earlier, boxing is the greatest soap opera ever put on TV, man. It's just so many ups and downs. It's just unbelievable.
So much drama. We have some fights to recap, so I'm just going to – I guess my thing is also it relates to UFC 172, so let's get into it.
All right.
John Jones pretty much dominated Glover Teixeira. I will say I do give Glover Teixeira some credit. I thought he landed some good shots on John Jones, and Jones didn't go down. And I thought, too, John Jones was putting him on him, and Teixeira still stuck in there. So I give Teixeira credit. 50-45, 50-45, 50-45, unanimous decision. A dominating victory for John Jones in his hometown, him doing the Ray Lewis dance, certainly getting tons of fans, as Greg Jackson would say, in Baltimore. I guess in terms, there's 2 aspects to this fight, and I guess let's get to the controversial one first. John Jones with the hand poke, hand out. He did, I believe, poke Teixeira in the eye. He was warned for it. Ultimately, he put his hand out in Teixeira's face. I don't believe he poked him in the eye after he was warned, but certainly did it in terms of putting his hand in his face. I don't think we've really seen that from John Jones aggressively in this fight compared to his other bouts. He kind of mocked the critics, kind of making fun of him on his Instagram here. Is this something that John Jones is going to use, maybe against Gustafsson and maybe other opponents, or do you think this is kind of a one-time thing because of Teixeira, because of the whole distance thing? What do you think of the whole hand controversy? Do you think it was a dirty tactic, or do you think this is just fighting and John Jones is just trying to win?
I have nothing against it. There are tons of martial arts out there martial art practices where you do try to, I guess, impede or immediately disable the opponent's primary weapon. In this case, it was the jab. A lot of guys set up big power punches with the jab. John Jones eliminated that 100%. Well, I shouldn't say 100% because he did get caught by a few. But he did eliminate that, and he basically dictated that fight, Jay. If you think about it, the way he defended that hand out, as far as I know, again, I'm not a genius when it comes to MMA rules, sticking your hand out with your fingers out is not illegal unless you make contact with the guy's eyeball.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that's as far as I recognize the rules. So if it allows you to prevent this, and what I think a lot of these guys should do, what I wish Teixeira would have done more is if he was really just taken off guard by it or upset that Jones was using it, why not walk into the hand a couple of times and force the referee to take a point from John Jones?
It's a fair point.
It just doesn't make sense for me. If you're upset about it, because Teixeira early on, he complained about it twice, I think. And
he did.
After the warning came, he stopped complaining to me, stopped complaining to the ref, which kind of shocked me. I was taken back from it, and that's why eventually a point wasn't taken away. 1, because Jones did a better job of avoiding the eyeballs, and 2, because Teixeira didn't complain about it more. To me, it's not a dirty tactic unless he makes contact with the eyes.
Sure. We only have 15 minutes remaining because we're going to speed through this, but I do want to talk about John Jones' style. And you mentioned a great story, and we'll remember to put this on our Facebook page, of really John Jones using a variety of martial arts techniques to completely dumbfound and dominate Teixeira. This is a great display of his martial arts ability. Let's relate that to his next fight. There have been rumors of him fighting Gustafsson in Sweden at 4 in the morning. Him versus Cormier. Cormier in a post-game show claimed that it would be a different fight with Cormier fighting John Jones. I guess, because we'll preview the Gustafsson fight at another time. That fight's going to happen, I think. But in terms of ranking and this is a question I want to ask you, Jorge, because to me, John Jones' pay-per-view numbers kind of resemble Anderson Silva's when he was starting his kind of domination of the middleweight division. But unlike Anderson Silva, John Jones speaks English. John Jones is controversial. John Jones has 2 other brothers in the NFL. John Jones is on Regis and Michael, Michael and Kelly, whatever the show is. He's on late night talk shows. He has a Nike deal. He's on a cover of EA Sports, the video game. He has everything going for him, and yet no one wants to see this guy fight. His fights are exciting. What's the disconnect here? Am I missing something? This guy seems to be an anomaly, even with people wanting to watch this guy fight. And to me, it goes further into seeing, this guy's always going to win. He's must-see. If John Jones is fighting on pay-per-view, I'm going to buy it. Why, with casual fans, where's the disconnect here? And if you predict, a pay-per-view buys for this show, where do you think it lands?
I think it's 800,000.
Really?
I think it does a decent amount, just because John Jones. I mean, that might be an exaggeration, but I think John Jones is around that level.
I hope so.
To me, John Jones is. I'm almost willing to say he's the best fighter in the world in MMA, and I think he may have moved past Floyd Mayweather as the best boxer as the best fighter in any sport.
Agreed. He's the greatest. Yeah.
It's just unbelievable because this guy takes chances. His age, Jay, he's 26 years old. He's 2 years younger than we are, man. It's just unbelievable to actually think of where this guy is at this point of his career. And the fact that, he's hoping to retire in 4 years. It's just unbelievable what he's accomplished, how he's able to control a lot of these guys that are supposed to give him problems. But, people are going to want to see that rematch with Gustafsson. So I think until we see that, John Jones dominate that fight, he'll solidify himself. But, I think, we're running on time, short on time, but I don't know if you have any more to say about this fight, but I want to talk about Anthony Johnson, man.
Me too. And I want to really get to the strategy of Phil Davis here, because to me, everybody's going to be saying, Anthony Johnson has great takedown defense. I think we saw none of his takedown defense to me, because I think Phil Davis, for some reason, and I'm not a wrestling expert, and Erica or somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here. But to me, we did not see Phil Davis officially go for a patented double leg. We did not see Phil Davis really force the issue in terms of the takedowns. What was the deal? Was Phil Davis distracted? Was Phil Davis not into this fight and underestimating Anthony Johnson? What was the deal here? Because certainly, in terms of Phil Davis using his wrestling ability, we did not see that this past Saturday night, did we? Was those takedowns the best he can do? Am I missing something here? Anthony Johnson certainly put on a striking display, dominating 30-27 all three scorecards. What was your thoughts on this fight?
Man, to say that I was shocked would be an understatement. Anthony Johnson looked flawless in this damn fight, man. This might be I think it was the greatest performance of his career, and I think people putting him on blast, the blogs, the websites just bashing on him completely in his last UFC performance, just unleash a beast that I don't even think he knew could be developed. And you know what, people did not pay attention, but Anthony Johnson's head movement out of anything else is what impressed me the most. Jay, dare me to say it was Mike Tyson-esque. That's how beautiful the head movement was. He was reading Phil Davis's punches and jabs before he was even snapping them off. He was dodging them like no one's business. I mean, if you can find that fight and stream it, YouTube it, whatever it might be again, I want you to pay attention to the head movement and the top body movement he had. It was very early Mike Tyson-esque the way he had that. So his just ability to read Phil Davis's punches and is what impressed me the most.
Yeah, just an unbelievable display. And certainly he's now a contender, top 5 easily. Quickly here, I didn't want to glance over some other results. Benavidez defeated Timothy Elliott. Elliott was kind of dominating Benavidez. I was concerned, but Benavidez pulled out the victory, getting a guillotine choke round 1. And also, Takanori Gomi, Isaac Valley flag. I was out getting pizza, so I missed part of this fight, but it seemed like it was a war when these guys were going at it. Valley Flag loses a close decision. You mentioned Jorge last week that, Flag was on the correct end on these close decisions, but it seemed like his luck ran out on this fight. But certainly, I think it was fight of the night. So even though he lost, he got the bonus check.
He got a pretty good check there. So nonetheless, I think Isaac Valley Flag's safe with the UFC for at least another 2 fights. One thing I quickly wanted to correct you about.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Joe Benavidez didn't win by guillotine. He calls it the what did he call it? The Joa Constrictor is what he called it.
Gotcha.
But,
okay.
Officially it'll go down as a guillotine choke, but apparently it's a move that he claims to have created called the Joa Constrictor.
Understood.
Pretty clever name, though.
Yeah, I do. Before the Mayweather fight, I did want to touch on this because this was an absolute war. Lucas Matisse against John Molina. Woo! I saw the replay on Wednesday. This was unbelievable, and it seemed like this wasn't really covered too much. Just an unbelievable war. Matisse goes down real quickly. This is obviously a Fight of the Year candidate, but I don't know about the odds in this fight, but I would have to say that Matisse was considered the favorite out of this fight. And really, I want to talk about the 10th round here. First of all, I didn't know that Joe Goossen was the trainer of, I believe, of Molina, and really looked just like Dan Goossen, but like a skinnier version. Really, the way he was dressed with the jean jacket and everything. But what was going on with him pushing the doctor? The doctor's trying to check on Molina here. Could that be a findable offense? Because Goossen was pretty aggressive with the physician, just trying to do his job here. But it seemed like Goossen was pretty aggressive in trying to block the doctor from trying to check on Molina. Can you take us into that round here? Well, and do you think Goossen should be fined?
No, I do not think so. To answer your question, no. That doctor was so freshly dressed, it looked like if it were me in the corner, I think it'd be one of the commission guys trying to stop the fight. So I think that's exactly what was going through the Goossen's mind. He probably didn't even know who the doctor was that night. You know what I mean? It's like you're in the back with your guys. You're not watching any of the undercard fights or who's at ringside. So as far as he's concerned, that was a commissioner trying to come and stop the fight, and he was in his way trying to stop him. But there was a little bit of shouting match. Very unprofessional one on the doctor's part, I think. For him not to say, hey, I'm the doctor, I'm going to look at this guy. And the doctor also initially told Joe Goossen to shut up. Joe Goossen was like, no, he's good. The doctor just straight up yelled at him and said, shut up. And Joe Goossen said, you shut up. Who do you think you're talking to? And that's where things escalated. I mean, come on. If you're a doctor doing your job, who are you to try to tell? Could you imagine your physician telling you to shut up while he's weighing you, man? It's just, come on, man.
Sure. Yeah. Pretty bizarre stuff.
But nonetheless, this fight was,
excellent.
Let me tell you, you're going to freak out on the odds. Lucas Matisse was an 8-1 favorite. John Molina was a 5-1 underdog. Molina knocked Lucas Matisse down twice in a stellar fight. Just a throwback late 50s boxing match that I think anyone who's a combat sports fan should check out.
Classic. Keith Thurman, Julio Diaz. Keith Thurman gets the victory. Called out Sean Porter. Real quickly, what do you think of that fight? Diaz said that he had some trouble breathing there, got hit with a body shot, but Keith Thurman moves on. What do you think about Thurman versus Sean Porter in a possible match?
It. I love that fight. I think it'd be bombs away. I think Porter ultimately wins that fight, but it's still, it'd be a Lucas Matisse, John Molina type of fight if you ask me. I think you have two guys that just have power punches and really don't have much it's a technical brawler. I don't know if that makes sense. I think Sean Porter comes away with that fight, but I would love to see it.
7 minutes remaining, Jorge. I'm going to ask you to put on your best legal defense and convince me of this card. Saturday night, Adrian Broner versus Carlos Molina. We have Amir Khan against Luis Collazo. Convince me why I should buy this pay-per-view for $60, or maybe you won't. But if you're going to get this show, Jorge, convince me why I should pay the money now that I have Showtime now.
Oh, Jay, I'm going to tell you to stream it, man. No, I mean, let me tell you, the co-main event has a lot of potential. There's a lot riding on this fight for Amir Khan. Potentially, the co-main event is an audition for either one of these guys to fight Floyd Mayweather. Luis Collazo is a dark horse to get a fight with Floyd Mayweather, but nonetheless, I mean, Amir Khan's only a 2-1 favorite. Luis Collazo has been, a veteran that's developed himself late in his career and has come up with some huge victories as of late, has given guys, like Paul Malignaggi trouble in his past. And again, this was when Paul Malignaggi was in his prime. But if you're going to order this card, do so partially because you're seeing the best boxer in the world in it in Floyd Mayweather, but because this co-main event, and I'm not exaggerating, Jay, I feel that this has a potential to be one of the better fights of the year.
Really?
One,
Okay.
because of two intriguing things. Luis Collazo has some pop in his gloves. Amir Khan is in my mind, one of the 5 pure best boxers in the world. If you ask me, he doesn't have the chin to back it up, and that's what makes this intriguing. That Collazo can knock Khan out in any given round, but Khan can also outbox Luis Collazo for those 12 rounds. So that's what is so intriguing to me about that fight. Luis Collazo obviously has come out of nowhere to win his last 4 fights. Victor Ortiz, he obviously upset the last time around, but this is a big fight for Khan. If Khan wins, I think he gets the September showdown against Floyd Mayweather.
So they're calling this fight the moment. Will it be the moment for Marcos Maidana in a positive way or a negative way in which he's staring up on the lights here?
Man, I think what Marcos Maidana has riding on him is the fact that he now has a name. That now that he's fighting the best fighter in the world, he now has a name behind him where he can build off of this fight. Do I think Marcos Maidana will win this fight? No. He's a 20-1 underdog to knock. Let me break it down. It's a prop bet to knock Floyd Mayweather out after the 3rd round. So if you think he'll knock Floyd Mayweather out after the 3rd round, put some big time money on it because he's a 20-1 underdog there. Overall, he's a 6-1 underdog. But it's just you're at the point of the career where this is Floyd Mayweather's farewell tour. He's not going to take any major chances against any opponent. So if you think Floyd Mayweather is going to lose, that time has come and gone. One of the biggest things that hampers Marcos Maidana in this is that he's fighting at a 154-pound weight limit, which he has never fought at. So Floyd Mayweather has a huge advantage. He's fought at the 154-pound weight division several times. So it's unfortunate, but let me tell you something. Roy Jones Jr. was asked by Max Kellerman on an HBO broadcast, how do you beat that shoulder roll defense? Roy Jones, who had a lot of success against guys who used the shoulder roll in the middleweight and light heavyweight division, said you got to hit the top of the head. No one does that better than Marcos Maidana in the welterweight or the light middleweight limit. So there's a potential for Maidana to at least hurt or make this an exciting contest early on. But if you ask me for a result, I say Maidana wears down. Mayweather gets his first legitimate knockout in like 6 years. I think he's going to stop him in the 8th or 9th round. I know everyone else is picking unanimous decision, but I'm picking stoppage in the 8th or 9th round.
I do. I think this is similar to the Ricky Hatton fight.
I agree.
I think it's kind of on that kind of bar here. Only Ricky Hatton had a lot more momentum and a lot more popularity, I think, compared to Maidana. I agree. I say 10th round stoppage for Mayweather, and hopefully he moves on to some maybe more competitive fights. But we'll see, man. We'll see. I think that's going to wrap up our show. Anything else you want to add, Jorge, before we say goodbye?
No, I saw earlier that UFC has Gracie versus Sakuraba on UFC Fight Pass, so I think I'm going to check that out this weekend.
You have, before we go here, we only have 2 minutes, real quickly. I heard, because I did the trial all the way to March, and then I discontinued it, and I'm using the WWE Network, and I don't regret that decision. But I heard now that Fight Pass has all the prides, has all a bunch of UFC, WEC, Strikeforce, full pay-per-view events. Is that correct?
That is correct. So I'm willing to check those out here. I haven't checked any of those out, but I did see those online. So please believe I'm going to check out some of those early Pride ones.
Yeah, hopefully if the UFC Network goes, and the UFC Fight Pass goes on Apple TV, maybe I'll get it. But, Verdun was wearing a UFC Network shirt. Maybe a UFC Network, similarly to WWE Network's coming, so we'll see there. That's going to wrap up our show, man. You've been listening to episode 188 of The Low Blow. Let's get in touch with us through social media. Also listen to us on Spreaker, iTunes, and on Stitcher. Episode 188 on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, MyMMANews.com. For Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. We will see you next week. Enjoy the fights.
Peace.